My name is Hadley Crane. I was 29 years old and 7 months pregnant the night my stepmother stood up at Christmas dinner in front of 22 relatives, pointed her wine glass at my belly, and called me a gold digger. She said it twice, because the first time the room was too shocked to react. My father was sitting 3 feet away from her. He looked at his plate. He looked at his fork. He looked at the candles. He did not look at me. My half-sister Brielle laughed into her napkin, the way she had laughed at me since we were teenagers. My Aunt Linda whispered, "Oh my God, Patricia, sit down." But Patricia did not sit down. She tapped her glass with a butter knife and said, "Let's be honest tonight. Hadley married into this family the long way, pretending to work for Daddy, pretending to care. Now she shows up pregnant, expecting a bigger slice of a company she never built." I let her finish. I let her smile. I let her win the room for exactly 40 seconds. Then I reached into my coat pocket, set my phone face up on the cranberry-stained tablecloth, and pressed play on a voice memo dated 3 months earlier. By the time it finished, my father was the one crying, my stepmother was the one walking out the front door, and Brielle was the one calling a lawyer who had already been retained against her. If you have ever been called a name in public by someone who knew exactly how to make a whole room nod along, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if you are new to her silence, please subscribe, because tonight I want to tell you what it really takes to sit at a table where everyone has decided in advance that you are the villain, and to win without ever raising your voice. To understand the voice memo, you have to understand my father, Hugh Crane. Hugh built Crane Mechanical out of a leased garage in Asheville 32 years ago. 2 trucks, 1 welder, a handshake contract with a regional hospital that needed emergency boiler repairs. By the time I was born, Crane Mechanical had 18 employees. By the time I graduated high school, it had 240 and contracts with hospitals across 4 states. My mother, Rosalind, ran the office side of the company until she died of an aneurysm in our kitchen when I was 17. She just put down a coffee cup, said, "That's strange," and was gone before the ambulance reached the porch. My father did not work for 6 weeks. He did not eat solid food for almost 3. The first time he laughed again, it was at something I said about how Mom used to organize his receipts by anger level, and he hugged me so hard I could feel his ribs. Patricia came into the picture 11 months later. She was a regional sales rep for a part supplier we used. She wore cream blazers and gold bracelets and called my father, Huey, in that sing-song voice some women perfect on commission. She had a daughter named Brielle from a previous marriage. Brielle was 20, already used to being the favorite of any room she walked into, and she decided within 5 minutes of meeting me that I was the inconvenient leftover from a wife she could not compete with. Patricia decided the same thing, but she dressed her version up in concern. "Hadley, sweetheart, you don't have to feel obligated to come to family dinners." "Hadley, sweetheart, your father needs a fresh start now." "Hadley, sweetheart, your mother would want him to be happy." Sweetheart, sweetheart, sweetheart. Every time she said it, a small piece of my mother's memory got moved 1 shelf lower in that house. I went to college, then business school, and I came back to Asheville at 24 because my father called me on a Tuesday afternoon and said, "Pumpkin, I need somebody in this office who actually loves the company." He did not mean Patricia. He did not mean Brielle, who by then was 27 and spending most of her time on cruise ships posting curated photos that paid for nothing. He meant me. I started as an operations analyst. I lived in a 600-square-foot apartment above a coffee shop, drove the same Civic I had in college, packed my own lunch every day for 2.5 years, and I learned every single corner of that business the way my mother had once learned it. Boilers, billing codes, union contracts, OSHA reports, fleet maintenance, payroll, the names of every dispatcher's kids. I worked weekends. I worked through migraines. I built a digital scheduling system that cut our service window down from 6 hours to 90 minutes, and our revenue jumped almost 19% in the first year I ran operations. Patricia did not work at the company. Brielle did not work at the company. They did, however, have opinions about it. Loud ones. Patricia kept reminding my father that, as his wife, she was entitled to be informed. Brielle kept showing up at the office during lunch hours to ask about distributions. My father, who had built a $250,000 enterprise from a leased garage, suddenly could not finish a sentence about the company without checking Patricia's face. He started talking about retirement, about a family transition plan, about how it was important for the new business structure to reflect the whole family. That last sentence was Patricia's sentence, in Patricia's tone, coming out of my father's mouth. I knew that the way a daughter always knows. When I was 28, my father invited me to dinner at his lake house. Just the two of us. He grilled trout, badly, and told me he wanted to officially transfer 51% of Crane Mechanical to me. Not split. Not held in trust. Sole controlling interest. He said, "Pumpkin, I've watched you carry this company for 4 years. The other 39% will go into a family trust for Brielle and any future grandchildren with rules. The remaining 10% stays with me until I die. Your mother and I always meant for Crane Mechanical to be yours. Patricia doesn't know yet. I want to handle that part." I asked him why he was telling me before he told her. He looked at the lake for a long time and said, "Because I want you to have the papers signed before she has a chance to redecorate them." The transfer happened on a Wednesday in March. I signed in my lawyer's office. My father signed in his lawyer's office. The shares moved. It was filed with the state. It was real. He asked me to keep it quiet for 1 fiscal quarter so the leadership team could announce it cleanly at the spring meeting. I agreed. I went home, sat on the floor of my apartment, and cried for 31 minutes because my mother was not alive to see what her quiet daughter had just been handed. 2 weeks later, I got pregnant. My husband, Eli, is a high school art teacher. He paints murals on the side. He is, by the standards of Patricia's wine club, not impressive. She had been very vocal about him at the engagement party 2 years earlier, asking my father at the cake table whether Eli would be on the company insurance because she hated to see Hugh subsidize hobbies. Eli heard her. He laughed it off. He always laughs it off. That is one of the reasons I married him. We told my father about the pregnancy in October. He cried the way men cry when they remember being a younger man holding a younger baby. He said, "Your mother gets to be a grandmother through you, Hadley." Patricia heard that sentence. I watched her hear it. Her face did the thing it does when she is calculating, which is the same face she makes when the waiter brings the wrong wine. A week later, Patricia called me at the office. She said, "Sweetheart, can I take you to lunch? Just us girls." I said yes because at 7 weeks pregnant, I was hungry every 90 minutes and not yet smart enough to suspect free food. We met at a wine bar she liked. She ordered me sparkling water with 3 slices of lemon, the way you order something for someone you intend to lecture. She told me that with the baby coming, it was time to think about the family's long-term financial health. She told me my father was not himself lately, that he was easily influenced, that decisions made in this period would not be fair to everyone. Then she said, and I will never forget the wording, "Hadley, sweetheart, you and I both know your father feels guilty about your mother. Don't take advantage of a guilty man." I went home and threw up. Eli held my hair and asked what she said. I told him. He asked, "Did you record it?" And that was the first time I thought about a voice memo. 3 days later, Patricia invited me to her house for what she called a family planning conversation. She specifically asked me to come, without Eli. I went because pregnant women sometimes underestimate the people who underestimate them, and I want to be honest about that. I sat down at her glass dining table across from her and Brielle. Brielle had a notebook open. Patricia had a printout. The printout was a homemade pie chart of Crane Mechanical, divided into wedges that did not exist in any legal document anywhere on Earth, with Brielle's name on a wedge larger than mine, and Patricia's name on a wedge that did not legally belong to her at all. Patricia said, "We just want to make sure things are fair before any official announcements get made." Brielle said, "You've had a lot of access, Hadley. We want equal access now." Patricia said, "Your father agrees with us in principle. He just needs the family to present a united front so he doesn't feel cornered." My father had not agreed with them. My father had already signed the paperwork 5 months earlier. They did not know that. They thought they were warning me before a decision that had already been made. That was when I pressed record. I sat in that chair for 41 minutes while Patricia and Brielle laid out, in their own words, how they planned to manipulate my father into restructuring the company before the baby was born. Patricia talked about timing it around what she called grief anniversaries. She talked about discouraging me from attending board meetings during my third trimester because stress is bad for babies. She talked about telling my father that I was emotionally unstable due to hormones if I resisted. Brielle talked about how she deserved an executive title because she had grown up in proximity to the business. Patricia said the line I will hear for the rest of my life. She said, "Hadley is a gold digger in slow motion. She just dressed it up as work ethic."
Brielle laughed.
I did not react. I drank my water. I said, "I'll think about it." I went home. I locked the voice memo with a passcode. I emailed an encrypted copy to my lawyer, my husband, and a personal backup. I did not tell my father. Not yet. Because part of me, the part that grew up watching him fail to defend my mother's memory in his own kitchen, needed to know whether he would defend her daughter in front of the whole family before I handed him the easy answer. December came. Patricia announced a proper Crane family Christmas at the lake house. 22 people.
Catered.
A photographer. She had been planning it for weeks. I knew, looking at the seating chart she emailed me, that this was the night she was going to make her move. She had seated me between Brielle and Aunt Linda. She had seated my father at the opposite end of the table, far enough away that he would not be able to interrupt cleanly. She had even labeled my place card with my maiden name, not my married name. Eli noticed it before I did. He said, "Babe, do you want to skip?" I said, "No. I want a witness." I wore a black sweater dress that showed the baby. I put my phone in my coat pocket. The voice memo from October was already cued, trimmed, and ready, with the cleanest 40 seconds of Patricia's own voice cued first. Dinner went exactly how she wanted it for the first hour. Compliments to the host. A toast about new chapters. A pointed remark from Brielle about how some people marry up and some people work up. My father laughed politely, which is what he does when he does not know what else to do. Then, somewhere between the prime rib and the dessert course, Patricia stood up, tapped her glass, and made her speech. About honesty. About fairness. About how Hadley had been, quote, riding her father's coattails since college. About how Hadley had timed her pregnancy, quote, suspiciously close to estate planning conversations. About how Hadley was a gold digger. She said it loud. She said it twice. She smiled at me both times. 22 faces turned toward me. My father stared at his plate. Brielle giggled. I stood up slowly. I am not naturally a stander. My back hurt. My ankles hurt. But I stood up because I wanted everyone to remember what a calm pregnant woman looks like in the moment her stepmother decides to gamble her entire marriage on humiliating a daughter who already owned the house of cards. I said, "Patricia, before I respond, I want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. You believe I have manipulated my father, faked a job, and timed a pregnancy in order to steal a company that, in your opinion, should belong to your daughter." She said, "That's exactly what I'm saying." The room went quiet enough to hear the ice in the bucket settle. I said, "Thank you for being clear." Then I placed my phone on the table. I pressed play. Her own voice came out of the speaker first. The line about gold diggers in slow motion. The line about grief anniversaries. The line about telling Hugh his daughter was emotionally unstable. The line about discouraging me from board meetings under the cover of hormones. Brielle's laugh on the recording hit the room like a slap. Aunt Linda put down her wine glass. My father lifted his head for the first time since dinner started. 40 seconds in, Patricia lunged for the phone. Eli put his hand gently over the screen and shook his head. Let it finish. It finished. There was a sound in that room I have only ever heard once in my life. The sound of 22 adults realizing at the same time that the woman they had agreed to look down on was the one who had brought the evidence. Aunt Linda said, very quietly, "Patricia, what is wrong with you?" Uncle Marcus said, "Hugh, did you know?" My father said the only honest thing he had said all night. He said, "No, but I should have." Patricia switched tactics, so fast you could see the seams. She said the recording was illegal. It wasn't. North Carolina is a one-party consent state, and I had been a party to that conversation. She said I had edited it. I hadn't, and my lawyer already had the raw file with timestamps. She said I was attacking her in front of the family. I said, "No, Patricia. You attacked me in front of the family. I just brought receipts." Then I did the thing I had practiced in my head for 2 months. I turned to my father and I said, calmly, in front of every relative he had, "Dad, the shares have already been transferred. They were transferred in March. Patricia and Brielle have been planning, on record, to pressure you into reversing a decision you already made and filed with the state. I have not said a word to anyone until tonight. I wanted to see whether you would defend me in this room before I told you that you don't legally need to. My father did something then that I will tell my child about one day." He stood up, walked the entire length of the table, past Patricia, past Brielle, past the cousins and the in-laws and the photographer, and he stopped beside my chair. He put his hand on my shoulder. He looked at the room and he said, "Hadley owns 51% of Crane Mechanical. As of last March. By my choice. By her work. By her mother's memory. Anyone at this table who has a problem with that can leave my house."
Patricia left.
She didn't even take her coat. Brielle ran after her, already on the phone. The photographer, bless him, kept taking pictures because nobody had told him to stop. Aunt Linda hugged me so hard I worried about the baby. Uncle Marcus poured my father a whiskey and said, "Hugh, your wife just married herself into a divorce." He was right. Patricia filed for separation 11 days later, which is exactly how long it took her attorney to read the prenup my mother had insisted on before she died. The prenup my mother had insisted on, in 2012, while she was already sick, because she said, and I quote my father quoting her, "Hugh, if I die and you marry the wrong woman, do not let her near our daughter's future." Brielle tried to sue 3 times. The case never made it past initial review because there was nothing to sue. The shares were clean. The transfer was clean. The recording was admissible. The pie chart Patricia had printed out at her glass dining table was the only piece of paper in the entire conflict that had no legal standing whatsoever. The judge actually noted it in a footnote. I have framed that footnote. It's on the wall of my office, next to a photograph of my mother at the original Crane Mechanical garage in 1993, holding a clipboard and looking exactly as tired and proud as I look on most Mondays. My daughter was born in February. Her name is Rose Elise Crane, after my mother. My father visits every Sunday with a coloring book and a bag of orange slices. He pays for nothing in our house, because we don't need him to. He has, however, started attending grief counseling. He told me last month that he didn't realize how many times he had stayed silent in rooms where my mother would have spoken. He told me he was sorry. I told him I knew. Some apologies have to be earned across years, not minutes. He is earning his. Patricia still tells people, at the wine bars she frequents, that I stole the company. Brielle still posts cruise photos. I do not respond to any of it. Because here is what I learned at 29 years old, standing at a Christmas table with a baby kicking inside me and a recording in my pocket. The loudest woman in the room is almost never the most prepared one. Cruelty travels fast, but documentation travels farther. And a calm voice on a recording will out-argue an angry voice at a dinner table every single time. If you have ever been called a name by someone who counted on the fact that you would never defend yourself in public, write the word Memo in the comments so I know you made it to the end. And if you believe the quietest woman at the table is usually the one holding the real paperwork, subscribe to her silence. We tell the stories where she does not raise her voice, she raises her evidence. My mother used to say that the right sentence at the wrong time loses. The right sentence at the right time wins everything. She was right. So is her granddaughter, already, even at 4 months old, with a fist that closes around my finger like she has been told, somewhere in her blood, that Crane women hold on to what is theirs.